Decades ago, the world was suddenly transformed when malicious ghosts began appearing everywhere, plunging civilization into chaos and ushering in the mythic era. In this new age, people could awaken unique classes, master powerful abilities, evolve through higher ranks, and grow stronger with every battle. These awakened warriors became humanity's greatest hope, fighting ghosts and monstrous creatures across Blue Star while sacrificing everything to secure safe havens where mankind could survive. Before long, the Awakened stood at the very center of the world, shaping its future through sheer power. The story then shifts to Hang High School in the Leah Federation, where the long-awaited awakening ceremony is about to begin. As students gather around a radiant golden magic circle surrounding an ancient altar, combat instructor Lu Hu, a rugged man with a thick beard, reminds everyone that the next few moments will determine the course of their lives. Among the crowd stands Feng Zhao, who transmigrated into this world years ago and has been waiting for this day ever since. When Lu Hu calls his name, the students step aside as Feng Zhao calmly walks into the center of the magic circle. Several girls immediately begin guessing what class he'll awaken. One believes he'll become a priest because of his gentle appearance, while another jokes that someone that handsome deserves nothing less. But not everyone is impressed. A blonde-haired boy watches him with obvious jealousy, insisting that looks are meaningless because only powerful classes truly matter. His sunglasses-wearing friend quickly agrees, only for a girl in the back to fire back that they're obviously just jealous of Feng Zhao's appearance. Meanwhile, Lu Hu quietly reviews his file, noting that Feng Zhao is the orphaned son of fallen heroes with outstanding grades and exceptional physical talent. Reaching the altar, Feng Zhao places a finger onto the glowing magic circle, instantly activating the ancient runes. A violent surge of energy erupts from beneath his feet as a massive pillar of golden light shoots into the sky, shaking the entire courtyard and forcing everyone to shield their eyes. The overwhelming display leaves every witness wondering what incredible class is about to appear. But before anyone can guess, black-green flames suddenly burst through the golden light as terrifying shadow energy engulfs Feng Zhao, forming a gigantic cross high above the school. Even Lu Hu is left speechless as he realizes they're witnessing a heaven and earth phenomenon, something only the rarest awakenings could trigger. Inside the swirling spectral mist, an enormous undead legion begins to emerge. Skeletal knights, ravenous ghouls, horned monsters, towering skeletal kings, skull-faced mages, and horned shamans all reveal themselves like rulers of death itself. Yet standing calmly at the center of it all, Feng Zhao opens a glowing golden system window that confirms his newly awakened class, Necromancer. As he quietly repeats the name, an enormous shadow spirit rises behind him before merging with his own shadow. Instead of being amazed, the students burst into laughter, mocking him for awakening what they believe is the weakest combat class. Although necromancers are incredibly rare, everyone knows their strength depends on the undead realm, a place ordinary humans are almost impossible to access. Feng Zhao pays no attention to their ridicule as his status panel appears, identifying him as a lower-rank necromancer apprentice with modest base attributes. Suddenly, another notification appears, congratulating him for unlocking the Undead Realm experience system. The system explains that it has connected him directly to the Undead Realm, created a personal undead clone, and allows him to explore that world, devour undead to gain experience, level up rapidly, and even summon his clone into reality despite the risks involved. Holding a green skull-shaped flame in his hand, Feng Zhao instantly realizes this system was practically made for his class. The moment he activates it, his vision shifts into the undead realm, where a towering skeletal warrior clad in dark armor stands alone across a ruined wasteland beneath a blood-red moon. He quickly realizes this fearsome skeleton is his clone, one that he can temporarily possess to gain experience firsthand, while any undead it defeats can later be summoned into the real world. Surrounded by piles of monster corpses, Feng Zhao immediately grasps the terrifying potential of this ability. As long as he keeps killing, he can build an endless undead army. With complete confidence, he declares that the entire undead realm will become his personal hunting ground. For now, however, he decides to postpone his exploration and finish the awakening ceremony first. He commands the system to summon his clone into reality, and a green, ice-like magic circle instantly forms beneath his feet. Ethereal chains and glowing runes spiral upward as a pillar of emerald flames erupts, slowly revealing the armored skeleton wrapped in a dark cloak. Feng Zhao quietly observes his first summon, realizing it is currently the strongest weapon at his disposal. Back on the stage, Lu Hu calls the next student, Zhao Chan, but can't help glancing back at Feng Zhao and his skeletal warrior. He can't hide his disappointment, believing such a gifted student deserved a far better class than Necromancer. Even so, several female students walk over to encourage Feng Zhao, telling him not to lose heart, because even a Necromancer still has the chance to become someone truly extraordinary. The girls even praised Feng Zhao's intimidating skeleton summon, which only made the blonde-haired student more furious. Unable to accept how much attention Feng Zhao was getting, he convinced himself that a novice necromancer's summon couldn't possibly compare to his assassin class. Believing Feng Zhao could only summon a limited number of undead, he decided to destroy the skeleton himself. Without warning, he secretly activated Silent Sleeve Arrow and fired a high-speed projectile straight at the skeleton's head. But just before impact, the skeleton vanished in a sudden burst of wind, causing the attack to miss completely. Before the blonde-haired student could even process what happened, the skeleton appeared behind him and smashed him with a devastating blow, sending him crashing to the ground. Feng Zhao calmly walked over as the injured student desperately tried to regain his composure. Even after seeing the skeleton's terrifying strength, he still assumed Feng Zhao himself had to be weak. Refusing to accept defeat, he charged forward with a purple dagger aimed directly at Feng Zhao's throat, but Feng Zhao casually caught his wrist in midair, stopping the attack instantly. Green lightning crackled around his arm as he dismissed the boy's arrogance, then slammed him violently into the ground, tearing apart the grass beneath them and leaving him badly injured and unconscious. Finding the whole situation boring, Feng Zhao simply walked away with his skeleton following behind. When instructor Lu Hu arrived and demanded to know what had happened, one of the girls explained that Lu Rena had tried to launch a sneak attack, only to be defeated instantly, while another added that he had gone down in a single strike. The surrounding students were stunned. Necromancers were supposed to be weak, yet Feng Zhao had completely dominated the fight. Later, Lu Rena was helped back up by his classmates, but as he glared in the direction Feng Zhao had disappeared, he silently swore to get revenge. Wanting somewhere private to test his new abilities, Feng Zhao headed to a secluded courtyard behind the school while his skeleton stood guard nearby. Opening the system interface once again, he received a prompt asking whether he wanted to begin his training in the undead realm. Feng Zhao understood the risks, but he also knew this was his fastest path to becoming stronger, especially if he could devour undead and gain power from them. Without hesitation, he confirmed the activation. Dark energy immediately surrounded his body, and his consciousness faded away. When his senses returned, he found himself beneath a blood-red moon in the terrifying undead realm, surrounded by endless bones, volcanic rocks, and twisted skeletal trees. Suddenly, a skeletal hand burst from the ground, followed by his armored clone rising from beneath the earth. Viewing the world through the clone's eyes, Feng Zhao opened its status window and examined its attributes, equipment, and a special ability called Skeletal Armament, which allowed it to forge weapons directly from bones. Realizing how useful this ability could be, he immediately considered creating a weapon. But before he could begin, 3 enormous undead wolves with glowing red eyes emerged from the darkness and surrounded him as a danger warning appeared. A massive 2-headed undead wolf attacked first, lunging forward as both jaws snapped toward him at once. Caught off guard, the skeleton clone barely rolled backward in time, its claws scraping across the rocky ground. After regaining his footing, Feng Zhao immediately understood that the undead realm was every bit as dangerous as he had imagined. But just as he tried to reposition, a sharp crack echoed through the canyon. Looking down, he realized his foot had become trapped inside the ribcage of an old skeleton buried beneath the ground. Before he could pull himself free, the 2-headed wolf attacked again, its jaws snapping only inches away from his face. Unable to escape, Feng Zhao desperately searched for anything he could use as a weapon and spotted a loose skull beside his trapped leg. An idea immediately struck him. With a powerful kick, he launched the skull straight into the attacking wolf's snout. The skull shattered on impact, but the monster barely reacted before shaking off the blow completely. Seeing how ineffective the attack was, Feng Zhao knew he needed something much stronger. After finally escaping, the skeleton clone leaped across the jagged volcanic terrain, narrowly avoiding the wolf's relentless attacks. At the same time, Feng Zhao quickly discovered that controlling a skeletal body was far more difficult than he had expected, and he knew he couldn't keep fighting like this forever. Scanning the rocky canyon for an opportunity, his glowing blue eyes suddenly locked onto a massive pile of discarded bones near a cliff. Just then, the 2-headed wolf launched itself toward him beneath the blood-red moon. This time, instead of running, the skeleton clone stood its ground and activated Skeletal Armament. Blue-black energy surged around his hand as dozens of bones rose into the air and rapidly fused together, forming a massive jagged bone scythe. Gripping his newly forged weapon, the skeleton clone swung with tremendous force. The razor-sharp blade tore through the air and plunged straight through the undead wolf's chest, shattering its ribcage and piercing deep into its body. But the advantage lasted only a moment. One of the wolf's heads suddenly struck from the side, clamping its enormous jaws around the clone's left arm before biting down with crushing force. At that exact moment, Feng Zhao suddenly felt an intense surge of pain in the real world. As his skeleton clone struggled desperately against the wolf's jaws, he came to a disturbing realization. Any injuries his clone suffered in the undead realm were somehow being transferred back to his real body. Feeling the phantom pain in his own body, Feng Zhao realized the system was far more dangerous than he had initially thought. But instead of panicking, his determination only grew stronger. Since the creature attacking him was already undead, he decided to turn the situation to his advantage. Using the skeleton clone's superior strength, he grabbed one of the wolf's heads by the neck with his free hand and violently tore it from the beast's body. Then, raising the severed head, he commanded death itself to serve him. In the next instant, his bone scythe transformed into a long, interlocking skeletal whip. Feng Zhao swung it in wide, rapid arcs, unleashing a sweeping circular attack that sliced through the remaining wolves and brought the entire pack crashing to the ground. As silence returned to the desolate battlefield, the skeleton clone released his weapon, impressed by how powerful skeletal armament had proven to be. But when Feng Zhao looked toward the lead wolf's corpse, he noticed a strange blue flame flickering above it. The moment he focused on the flame, an overwhelming hunger suddenly surged through him, so intense that he instinctively clutched his chest. His entire being seemed to be urging him to consume it. Following that instinct, the skeleton clone approached the corpse, gathered the blue flame, and absorbed the soul fire directly into his body. A system notification immediately appeared, showing that his strength had increased to 1.1 while his other attributes remained unchanged. Another window revealed that he had also gained 0.1 soul power. Curious about its purpose, Feng Zhao opened the explanation and learned that soul power was converted from soul energy and could be used to deduce skills, increase potential, and enhance equipment. At that moment, the path ahead became perfectly clear. By exploring the undead realm, devouring its creatures, and continuously evolving, he could keep becoming stronger. With his consciousness connected to the skeleton clone, Feng Zhao realized that as long as he continued hunting, his potential for growth was practically limitless. Looking across the enormous canyon, he saw countless skeletal soldiers wandering aimlessly through the dust, turning the entire undead realm into a massive hunting ground waiting for him. But before he could continue, faint footsteps suddenly echoed from somewhere in the darkness. The skeleton clone immediately turned toward the sound as a lone figure slowly emerged from the shadows. It was a mindless skeleton carrying 2 rusty blades. A green system window quickly analyzed the creature, identifying it as an apprentice-level undead commonly used as cannon fodder by necromancers. It possessed a fragile body, no intelligence, and one critical weakness: its soul fire. Seeing an easy target, Feng Zhao immediately activated skeletal armament. Dark energy pulled bones from a nearby pile and rapidly assembled them into a huge, jagged spear. The system confirmed the successful creation of the bone spear, and the skeleton clone instantly charged forward. With one powerful thrust, the spear punched straight through the wandering skeleton's chest, shattering its rib cage and releasing a burst of blue soul fire. The system immediately recorded increases in agility and soul power. Without slowing down, Feng Zhao spun the spear around and smashed another skeleton into pieces, earning another increase in constitution and even more soul power. From there, the hunt continued. One undead after another fell before him as he absorbed their soul flames, steadily increasing his power with every kill. After clearing the nearby enemies, Feng Zhao checked his status and saw that all of his attributes had improved significantly, while his accumulated soul power had also grown considerably. Even so, he knew this was nowhere near enough. If the undead realm could provide this much growth already, then he could become far stronger than he had ever imagined. Meanwhile, back at Hang High School, Feng Zhao remained in the secluded courtyard when a familiar voice suddenly called out to him. As his consciousness returned to reality, he opened his eyes and found Zhao Chan standing beside him, trying to get his attention. Surprised to see her, he asked why she had come, but Zhao Chan immediately noticed the wound on his left arm and reacted with concern. Looking down, Feng Zhao realized the injury was in exactly the same place where the undead wolf had bitten his skeleton clone. Zhao Chan, however, completely misunderstood what had happened. Believing Feng Zhao was so disappointed with awakening the Necromancer class that he had started hurting himself, she immediately scolded him for doing something so reckless. Realizing the misunderstanding, Feng Zhao decided it would be safer to find somewhere much more private before entering the undead realm again. For now, he simply brushed off her concern and told her it was nothing more than a small scratch. Zhao Chan clearly wasn't convinced, but before she could question him any further, the school bell rang, signaling the beginning of meditation class. Zhao Chan suggested they head back to class, and the two began walking toward the main building together. But along the way, Feng Zhao suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest and started coughing. Worried, Zhao Chan immediately offered to take him to the infirmary, but Feng Zhao insisted he was fine. Just then, a system warning appeared, informing him that he had spent too long connected to the undead realm and needed to pay closer attention to his physical condition. Checking his status, Feng Zhao noticed that his real-world attributes had increased as well, with improvements in strength, constitution, agility, and spirit. More importantly, a new option had appeared: deductible skill. This immediately caught his attention. If the system could actually help him create new abilities, then he might eventually develop powerful skills comparable to those possessed by top-tier awakened professionals. Soon, the bell rang throughout Hang High School as the students gathered inside their classroom. At the front stood Shen Hongyu, the teacher responsible for meditation class. Holding up a meditation manual, she explained that it contained basic meditation methods suited to each student's profession and instructed everyone to use meditation to awaken and display their professional abilities. She explained that meditation increased spirit power, which served as the foundation for using professional skills. She also reassured the students that failing at first was completely normal. revealing that even she had needed half a month before successfully mastering the basics. Feng Zhao listened quietly from his seat, but before he could pay much attention, a system notification suddenly appeared. It had detected the skeleton meditation method and offered to quickly deduce it to the entry stage. Feng Zhao accepted without hesitation. Energy immediately gathered around his head, and moments later, the system confirmed that he had successfully learned the skeleton meditation method. According to its description, it was an apprentice-level meditation technique designed for necromancers that gradually increased the spirit attribute by visualizing a skeleton. To Feng Zhao, this was almost ridiculously convenient. Visualizing a skeleton was basically no different from observing his own skeleton clone. Even better, he discovered that whenever his clone entered the undead realm, its activities there also counted as a form of meditation. In other words, while his main body rested in reality, his clone could continue cultivating and growing stronger in the undead realm, allowing him to train practically around the clock. However, the system quickly warned him that entering the undead realm consumed spirit power, and if the development of either his real body or clone became too unbalanced, the resulting burden could become dangerous. Understanding the risk, Feng Zhao immediately sent his clone back into the undead realm, where the armored skeleton resumed hunting low-level undead creatures. Feng Zhao couldn't have been more satisfied. While everyone else had to spend hours sitting still and cultivating, his clone could continuously kill monsters, gain attributes, and strengthen him at the same time. But another system notification soon appeared. One of his clone's abilities had reached instinct-level proficiency and could now be used as material to deduce an unknown skill for his main body at the cost of 10 soul power. Seeing the deductible skill option on his status panel, Feng Zhao finally understood how the system's deduction function worked. The process had to be carried out through his clone inside the undead realm. Without wasting any time, the armored skeleton initiated the deduction, and a progress bar appeared as the system began analyzing the new ability. Moments later, the deduction was successfully completed, granting Feng Zhao a brand new skill, Bone Javelin. This ability allowed him to condense a bone javelin and launch it at enemies, dealing both armor-piercing physical damage and death energy damage. The number of javelins, their power, and their effective range would all increase depending on his spirit attribute and skill proficiency. As the skeleton clone formed a bone spear in its hand, Feng Zhao realized the new skill perfectly matched the weapon he had previously created with skeletal armament. But what appeared next was even more surprising. A system interface revealed an entire derivative skill tree branching out from Bone Javelin, including Bone Shield, Giant Bone Claw, and Bone Prison. Feng Zhao hadn't expected a single deduced ability to unlock multiple possible evolutions, but before he could study them further, the clone spotted 2 low-level skeletons fleeing through the canyon. Since he still needed more soul power, they were perfect targets, and an ideal opportunity to test his new skill. The clone immediately gave chase and activated Bone Javelin. A massive bone spear tore through the air and struck one of the fleeing skeletons, instantly smashing it apart and scattering its bones across the ground. The system rewarded him with 0.05 agility and 0.05 soul power, followed by another increase of 0.05 strength and an additional 0.05 soul power. However, after seeing how small the rewards had become, Feng Zhao immediately noticed something important. These weaker skeletons were no longer providing as many attributes or as much soul power as before. After checking his updated status, he quickly understood the system's limitation. It wasn't going to let him endlessly farm weak enemies for unlimited power. To keep growing stronger, Feng Zhao knew his clone would eventually have to venture deeper into the far more dangerous regions of the undead realm. For now, however, he decided to continue hunting weaker undead for as long as they could still provide useful bone essence. Back at Hang High School, Feng Zhao sat quietly at his desk when he suddenly chuckled to himself, immediately catching Shen Hongyu's attention. A classmate behind him quickly tugged at his sleeve as a warning, but it was already too late. Shen Hongyu walked over and stopped beside his desk, criticizing him for laughing while everyone else was seriously practicing meditation. Feng Zhao tried to explain, but before he could finish, Lu Rina loudly claimed that the real reason was obvious. Feng Zhao simply couldn't meditate successfully. The classroom immediately erupted into discussion. Some students believed rare professions should naturally have stronger meditation effects, while others argued that everything depended on the profession itself. Since necromancers were incredibly rare, and their skeleton meditation method was rumored to be incomplete, many assumed it was perfectly normal for Feng Zhao to struggle. Shen Hongyu admitted that meditation was indeed more difficult for necromancers, but reminded him that difficulty was no excuse to give up, especially when his lack of participation was distracting everyone else. To make her point, she directed the class toward Lu Rina. Floating above his hand was a fiery dagger handle formed entirely through meditation. Shen Hongyu praised him for managing to manifest part of a weapon within just one class period. Lu Rina proudly explained that he had only comprehended about 1/3 of the meditation method, casually claiming that this level of progress merely made him an average genius. Then, turning toward Feng Zhao, he arrogantly asked if he finally understood the difference between a necromancer and other professions. Feng Zhao simply replied that his speed really did seem pretty average. Lu Rina was instantly stunned and angrily snapped back that someone who hadn't even entered meditation had no right to brag. But before the argument could escalate, a burst of dark green energy suddenly exploded outward, forcing Lu Rina backward as Fong Zhao coldly told him to move aside. Surprised by the commotion, Shen Hongyu ordered Lu Rina to return to his meditation before confronting Fong Zhao, reminding him that this was a meditation class, not a place to fight. Fong Zhao calmly stood up and explained that he only wanted Lu Rina out of the way because he was about to show her the results of his meditation. Xiao Qian watched nervously as whispers immediately spread throughout the classroom. Some wondered whether Fong Zhao had actually succeeded, while others insisted that even if he had, there was no way he could have made much progress in such a short time. Ignoring them completely, Fong Zhao activated the skeleton meditation method. In an instant, an overwhelming wave of dark energy erupted from his body and swept across the entire classroom, forcing several students backward. Shen Hongyu grabbed her hat to keep it from flying away as she stared in complete disbelief. She couldn't understand how anyone could achieve this level of progress within a single class period. Then, behind Fong Zhao, the enormous phantom of his armored skeleton clone slowly appeared within the swirling darkness. Standing calmly at the center of that terrifying energy, Fong Zhao remarked that if Lu Rina counted as an average genius, then he was probably 100 million times better. Just then, Instructor Lu Hu entered the classroom and casually commented that everyone seemed to be making good progress with their meditation methods. But his next announcement instantly changed the atmosphere. There would be a test the following day. Fong Zhao looked over in surprise as the entire classroom erupted into complaints. Some students couldn't believe combat training was starting so soon, while others panicked because they hadn't even reached the entry stage of their meditation methods. Amid all the commotion, Lu Rina glared bitterly at Fong Zhao. In his mind, meditation and actual combat were completely different things. No matter how impressive Fong Zhao's display had been, Lu Rina still saw him as nothing more than a fragile mage, and he was convinced that once real fighting began, Fong Zhao would no longer have a chance to show off. Meanwhile, inside the undead realm, countless mindless skeletons wandered through the barren rocky canyons as Fong Zhao's armored clone moved across the wasteland. Through their connection, Fong Zhao discovered that after reaching the entry stage of the skeleton meditation method, the amount of time he could remain connected to the undead realm had increased significantly. Determined not to waste a single moment of that advantage, the clone tightened its grip around the bone spear and decided to kill as many undead creatures as possible before Fong Zhao's spirit power ran out. Without hesitation, it charged forward, tearing through one skeleton after another and smashing them into pieces as clouds of dust and shattered bones filled the canyon. As the battle continued, Fong Zhao's skeleton clone pushed itself even harder, determined to eliminate as many undead as possible. After destroying a large number of skeletons, however, it finally began to slow down. Leaning against its bone spear, the clone realized that most of Fong Zhao's spirit power had already been exhausted. Just then, a system notification appeared, announcing that Fong Zhao's professional level had increased and his skeleton clone was now eligible for an upgrade. Realizing that all the hunting had finally paid off, the clone immediately accepted. A pillar of green light engulfed its entire body as the enhancement began. When the light disappeared, the skeleton emerged wearing upgraded armor, and its new status appeared before him. Its rank had advanced to middle apprentice, with strength reaching 5, constitution 3, agility 3, and spirit 3. Its equipment remained a gray inferior quality bone spear, while skeletal armament had reached instinct proficiency. More importantly, the upgrade had automatically granted a brand new skill called Brutal Strike. According to the description, Brutal Strike allowed the user to unleash an explosive burst of strength in a single attack, with its power determined by the user's strength attribute and skill proficiency. Fong Zhao was pleasantly surprised to discover that advancing in rank could automatically unlock new abilities. With Brutal Strike added to the clone's arsenal, hunting undead would become much more efficient. But before he could test the new skill, a sudden wave of weakness swept through the skeleton. Its remaining energy rapidly disappeared, and Fong Zhao immediately realized that he had become so distracted by the upgrade that he had forgotten his spirit power was already overdrawn. Unable to continue, the clone dropped to one knee and used its spear to support itself. Back at Haing High School, Fong Zhao sat on the concrete steps beside the sports field with one hand pressed against his forehead. His head was throbbing from excessive spirit power consumption, making it painfully obvious that his current spirit attribute was still far too low. Xiao Qian soon approached and asked what was wrong, pointing out that he had looked exhausted ever since meditation class and had remained that way throughout the entire week. Fong Zhao gave her a tired smile and insisted that he was fine, claiming he had simply been practicing too much every day. Inwardly, however, he reminded himself that no one could ever discover the existence of his system. From now on, entering the undead realm would have to be done somewhere completely private. As the two spoke, Lu Rina walked past with another student and immediately began mocking Fong Zhao, claiming the supposedly impressive Necromancer had already become exhausted from just a little extra meditation. His companion joined in, saying that reaching the entry stage of a meditation method was nothing worth bragging about. Lu Rina then declared that real value came from strength, not meditation progress. Annoyed by their constant hostility, Xiao Qian stepped forward and defended Fong Zhao. asking why they kept targeting someone who had never even offended them. Lu Reina dismissed her complaint and insisted that he was only stating the truth. Fang Zhao then calmly walked over and asked if Lu Reina wanted to get beaten again. The question immediately infuriated him. Lu Reina declared that he was no longer the same person he had been a week ago. As he clenched his fist, orange energy gathered around his hand, and he proudly revealed that he had already mastered a professional skill. With complete confidence, he claimed that defeating Fang Zhao would now take only a single move. Before the confrontation could go any further, a stern voice ordered them to stop. Everyone turned to see instructor Lu Hu approaching. He immediately reprimanded the students, reminding them that the school taught combat skills so they could fight vicious ghosts, not use their abilities to settle personal grudges against classmates. Lu Reina quickly backed down and admitted his mistake. Lu Hu then turned toward Fang Zhao and mentioned his impressive performance during meditation class, advising him to show the same dedication during combat training. Fang Zhao politely agreed, but as the instructor walked away, he couldn't help noticing that Lu Hu seemed to be paying unusually close attention to him. A moment later, Lu Hu stepped into the center of the sports field and ordered everyone to assemble. Once the class gathered, he instructed several students to bring out the equipment for that day's lesson. Soon, 2 students pushed a large covered cart onto the track. Curious, Fang Zhao watched as Lu Hu removed the covering, revealing a humanoid test golem underneath. Lu Hu explained that it was an apprentice-level test golem designed to measure offensive and defensive capabilities. Using the weakest type of abyss demon, the imp, as a reference, he explained that someone would need a defense value of at least 100 to withstand its claws head-on. One student looked at the worn machine and jokingly wondered whether it might fall apart if they hit it too hard. In response, Lu Hu casually struck the golem's head with a loud metallic clang and declared that no new student had ever managed to destroy one. In fact, if anyone could dismantle a test golem using nothing but their own strength that day, he would personally apply for a reward of 20 Alliance contribution points on their behalf. The promise of 20 Alliance contribution points immediately fired up the entire class. Fang Zhao knew exactly why everyone was so excited. Contribution points were essentially a universal currency in this world, used to purchase valuable items, resources, and even powerful skills. Naturally, students began volunteering to go first. Lu Hu quickly organized everyone into a line and announced that the common professions would be tested before the special ones. A dark-haired student stepped forward and cast Fireball, sending an explosive blast directly into the test golem. Despite the impressive impact, Lu Hu announced a score of only 48 and told him he still needed more training. The student walked away disappointed, unable to believe such a powerful-looking attack had scored so low. Next came a red-haired student who used Crippling Strike and scored 41, followed by a blue-haired archer whose Petrifying Arrow earned 50 points. One after another, the students completed their tests, but when the common professions were finished, not a single person had managed to break 60. Suddenly, the promised 20 contribution points seemed almost impossible to obtain. With the special professions finally taking their turn, everyone became curious about how much higher their scores would be. Standing quietly in line, Fang Zhao glanced at his system interface before looking down at his hands. Most of his current combat power came from his skeleton clone, so one question immediately crossed his mind. Could the test golem calculate damage cumulatively? Seeing him lost in thought, Lu Reina immediately mocked him, claiming his hesitation clearly meant he already knew his attack power would rank near the bottom of the class. Fang Zhao barely reacted, giving him nothing more than a casual acknowledgement. Confident that he could finally prove his superiority, Lu Reina stepped forward and declared that now that he had mastered a professional skill, Fang Zhao was about to witness the true gap between them. Activating Phantom Dagger, he lunged forward and slashed the test golem with full force. The display quickly registered 80 points. Lu Hu officially announced his attack capability as 80, and Lu Reina proudly used the result as proof of how powerful his hidden profession, Phantom Assassin, truly was. However, another student quickly reminded him that he wasn't the only hidden profession holder in the class. Lu Hu checked his clipboard and called Yan forward. As Yan entered the field, whispers immediately spread through the crowd. He had awakened as a demon hunter and had already attracted the attention of the school's senior staff, who recruited him into a specialized research group. Naturally, everyone wanted to see what he could do. Yan raised his hand and summoned a large curved blade as energy gathered around his body. He charged forward and unleashed Vengeance Strike, landing a powerful blow that registered 65 points. Some students were surprised, since the result was only slightly better than what several ordinary professions had achieved. But Yan calmly explained that his attack wasn't finished yet. In the next instant, he activated Vengeance Combo and unleashed a rapid series of consecutive strikes. With every hit, the golem's score climbed higher, rising from 69 to 88 before finally reaching 100 after the last attack connected. Lu Hu officially announced Yan's attack capability as 100. Watching closely, Fang Zhao finally confirmed his suspicion. The test golem didn't measure only the power of a single strike. It could calculate accumulated damage from consecutive attacks. That meant destroying it might not be nearly as difficult as everyone assumed. After achieving a perfect score of 100, Yan confidently believed no one else in the class would surpass him. Nearby, Zhao Chan complained that he had only reached that number by stacking multiple attacks together and regretted not attacking several more times during her own turn. Lu Rena immediately mocked her, pointing out that an assassin-type profession would never have access to that kind of combo ability. Before the argument could continue, Lu Hu called Zhao Chan forward for her test. Nervous but determined not to embarrass herself as the holder of a hidden profession, she gathered wind energy around her body, rushed forward, and struck the golem. The display showed only 31 points. Lu Hu announced her attack capability as 31, leaving Zhao Chan sighing helplessly as she accepted that support professions simply weren't designed for offense. Lu Rena immediately burst into laughter and mocked her low score, boasting that if he had been the one attacking, he could easily score above 80. The testing continued as Gujicho stepped forward and used Chain Wind Energy Missile, earning 72 points. Zhao Yuan followed with Shield Armor Charge and scored 69. Finally, Chunyang unleashed Giant Hammer Smash and achieved an impressive score of 84. As the test results continued to pile up, the students excitedly discussed the strongest performances. Even so, no one had managed to surpass Yin's score of 100, much less destroy the test golem. Then someone pointed out that one hidden profession still hadn't taken the test: Feng Zhao, the Necromancer. The moment his name was mentioned, Lu Rena burst out laughing and dismissed the possibility that Feng Zhao could accomplish anything impressive. He doubted Feng Zhao could even reach 10 attack points and mocked his skeletons as if they could barely stand on their own. Feng Zhao calmly asked if Lu Rena was really that certain he couldn't claim the 20 contribution points. Completely confident, Lu Rena declared that if Feng Zhao actually destroyed the golem, he would eat the machine right there on the spot. Feng Zhao simply smiled and told him to remember those words. He then walked to the center of the field and asked everyone to move back. Lu Rena assumed he was afraid of being laughed at after getting a terrible score, but Feng Zhao calmly explained that the skill he was about to use required plenty of space. Dark clouds immediately gathered overhead, as glowing green chains of magical energy spread across the field. Moments later, 10 skeletons rose from the ground, leaving everyone completely stunned. The students couldn't understand how an apprentice-level necromancer could summon 10 undead when newly awakened necromancers were normally limited to only 2. Some even wondered if Feng Zhao had somehow already advanced to the Black Iron rank. Even instructor Lu Hu could hardly believe what he was seeing. He remembered that Sujian, widely considered the most talented necromancer in history, had only been capable of summoning 5 skeletons immediately after awakening. If that was true, then Feng Zhao's talent might be even more terrifying. Meanwhile, Feng Zhao knew he was already holding back. If he revealed everything he was capable of, the attention he attracted would become far more troublesome. With a single command, he ordered the skeletons to attack. The undead warriors immediately charged forward with surprising speed and surrounded the test golem, unleashing a relentless barrage of attacks. The score rapidly climbed from 30 to 45, then 60, before finally stopping at 65. Seeing the number, Lu Rena immediately relaxed and started laughing again. He claimed the result was nothing impressive, and several students agreed that while 65 might be respectable for an ordinary warrior, it seemed disappointing for a summoner using 10 skeletons at once. Lu Rena mocked him even further, pointing out that each skeleton had contributed less than 10 attack points on average. But Feng Zhao calmly told him not to celebrate too early because the test had only just begun. When Lu Rena questioned what else he could possibly do, Feng Zhao simply snapped his fingers. Green energy exploded across the field once again. If 10 skeletons weren't enough, then he would use 20. Another wave of undead immediately emerged from the ground, expanding his force into an army of 20 skeleton warriors. The entire field erupted in disbelief. Zhao Chan excitedly cheered for Feng Zhao, saying she knew he could do it. Then the skeleton army launched its second assault. The golem's score rapidly climbed to 81, then 97, before breaking past 108 as the undead continued attacking without mercy. Under the overwhelming barrage, one of the golem's arms was completely destroyed, followed by a massive explosion that covered the field in smoke. When the dust finally cleared, the golem's severed head flew through the air while its damaged display crashed onto the ground, showing an unbelievable final score of 999. For a moment, everyone stood frozen in complete shock. Feng Zhao hadn't simply surpassed the previous record. He had pushed the test golem beyond its limits and completely destroyed it. Lu Rena stared at the wreckage in horror as Feng Zhao casually walked over, placed a hand on the golem's severed head, and reminded him about his earlier promise. Since the machine was now destroyed, Lu Rena was free to start eating it. Lu Rena could barely respond. Feng Zhao then told him he didn't actually have to eat the golem, but there was one condition. From now on, Lu Rena needed to stay out of his sight. Terrified and humiliated, Lu Rena immediately ran away, still claiming that he would settle the score another day. Afterward, Zhao Chan rushed over and excitedly asked Feng Zhao how he had become so powerful, even begging him to teach her. Feng Zhao awkwardly replied that he had done nothing special besides normal meditation training. Instructor Lu Hu soon approached as well, praising his incredible performance and promising to fight for a place for him on the school's specially cultivated seed list. Meanwhile, Inside the principal's office, the white-haired principal sat behind his desk reviewing the latest awakening report. Out of 10,000 new students, 9,130 had successfully awakened, giving the school an awakening rate of roughly 91%. He then reviewed a list of 85 rare profession holders being considered for the SEED program, including Zhao Yuan, Zhao Chan, Guji Cho, and Yan. The principal initially considered adding all 85 directly to the school's list of 100 SEED candidates, but when he reached Fong Zhao's profile, he suddenly stopped. After reviewing the information about his necromancer profession, the principal coldly concluded that such a class had no future and decided to exclude Fong Zhao from the SEED list. Not long afterward, someone arrived outside his office. The principal ordered them to enter, and instructor Lu Hu quickly walked inside carrying several documents. Surprised to see him during combat class, the principal asked why he had come personally instead of teaching his students. Lu Hu immediately explained that something urgent had happened and he needed to report it. The principal looked over the documents and asked why Lu Hu had come rushing in with such urgency. Lu Hu immediately presented Fong Zhao's file, explaining that he had awakened as a necromancer and strongly recommending that he be added to the school's SEED list. The principal admitted that necromancers had tremendous theoretical potential, but in reality, developing that profession to its full strength was extremely difficult. Lu Hu immediately brought up Major Suyan, a powerful necromancer whose combat ability rivaled that of other high-level mages. However, the principal argued that Suyan was a special case because she had received extensive training and resources under his personal guidance as her former mentor. In his eyes, there was no guarantee that Fong Zhao possessed the same potential. He also reminded Lu Hu that Fong Zhao's parents had once fought alongside them and were recognized as Federation heroes, but personal connections could not influence something as important as the SEED list. Every position came with valuable resources and serious responsibilities. Still unwilling to give up, Lu Hu submitted Fong Zhao's meditation and combat reports. The principal's expression immediately changed as he read through them. Fong Zhao had mastered the skeleton meditation method during his very first meditation class and was already capable of summoning more than 20 skeletons in actual combat. Lu Hu insisted that with talent like this, Fong Zhao might completely rewrite the history of the necromancer profession. After considering the evidence, the principal decided not to make a final judgment yet. Instead, he would personally evaluate Fong Zhao's performance once the simulated battlefield opened. Looking more closely at the file, even he became curious about just how far this young necromancer could go. Meanwhile, outside the school building, Fong Zhao walked alongside Zhao Chan, who couldn't stop wondering how he had achieved such ridiculous results. Summoning that many skeletons during his very first combat class was anything but normal. Fong Zhao casually replied that he had simply summoned a few extra skeletons and didn't think it was a big deal. Zhao Chan immediately accused him of being so humble that it almost sounded arrogant, but Fong Zhao genuinely didn't consider the achievement particularly impressive. After all, what everyone had witnessed was only a fraction of his true strength, and there was no reason to reveal everything he could do. Just then, Yan called out and asked him to stop. With complete confidence, Yan declared that he had never considered himself weaker than anyone, and among everyone in Class 1, Fong Zhao was the only person worthy of being his opponent. Both Fong Zhao and Zhao Chan fell awkwardly silent. Completely uninterested, Fong Zhao rejected him and started walking away. Zhao Chan couldn't help thinking that Yan was acting strangely, but Yan quickly stopped Fong Zhao and explained that he wasn't simply challenging him to a fight. He wanted Fong Zhao to become his sparring partner. After awakening the rare demon hunter profession, Yan had joined a specialized research group that required him to train against someone of comparable strength. Fong Zhao immediately asked why he should help with someone else's research. Yan responded with an offer of 10 contribution points in exchange for 2 weeks of sparring, with room and board included. The moment Fong Zhao heard the payment, his attitude changed completely. He immediately accepted and shook Yan's hand to seal the deal. Yan proudly remarked that Fong Zhao truly deserved to be the rival he had chosen, only to become slightly confused by how quickly he had agreed. Fong Zhao simply told him to stop wasting time and lead the way. As they followed Yan, Zhao Chan asked if Fong Zhao had really agreed to work with such a strange person that easily. Fong Zhao calmly reminded her that 10 contribution points was a considerable amount. Resources like those could become extremely useful. Zhao Chan then wondered if Yan came from a wealthy family since he was spending contribution points so generously. Fong Zhao explained that Yan wasn't rich at all. The points had actually been advanced to him by the Research Association. Surprised, Zhao Chan asked whether the association was really that generous, but Fong Zhao clarified that it was only an advance and Yan would eventually have to repay everything. Judging by his spending habits, Fong Zhao estimated that Yan might spend around 20 years after graduation paying off his debt. Zhao Chan could only stare in surprise at that explanation. A moment later, Yan called for them to hurry and led them into a specialized building. Inside, he proudly introduced the laboratory and asked what they thought. Looking around at the advanced equipment, Fong Zhao admitted that the facility was extremely well equipped. Clearly, rare profession holders received extraordinary treatment. Soon, a man approached and introduced himself as Chungking Shan, a silver-level Gale Ranger and the person responsible for the Demon Hunter Research Association. Fong Zhao and Zhao Chan greeted him politely, and Chungking Shan acknowledged them in return. Fong Zhao immediately noticed something unusual about the man. Although Chungking Shan currently worked in logistics and research, he still carried the unmistakable presence of someone who had experienced real battles on the front lines. As they walked through the laboratory, Chungking Shan explained why the demon hunter profession had recently received so much attention. Not long ago, inside the Abyss Mystic Realm, a senior demon hunter had achieved a legendary crown and successfully slain an Abyss Lord, demonstrating terrifying combat power. Because of that achievement, when Yin awakened as a demon hunter, the Hang Military Academy immediately recognized his potential and established this specialized research group to fully develop his profession. Chungking Shan then revealed that he had already reviewed Fong Zhao's records and offered to establish a separate research association specifically for him if he was interested. Fong Zhao immediately declined. After seeing Yan's situation, he had absolutely no intention of spending the next 20 years after graduation buried in debt. Chungking Shan respected his decision and moved directly to the actual combat research. As Fong Zhao and Yin headed downstairs toward the training arena, Chungking Shan explained that strict safety measures were already in place, allowing both of them to fight freely without worrying about their lives being in danger. Fong Zhao quietly analyzed his opponent. Yan possessed incredible speed and explosive damage, making him a natural threat to a necromancer who relied heavily on summoning. Realizing he needed more combat power, Fong Zhao opened his system skill tree and began strengthening his abilities. Summon Skeleton was upgraded, Bone Javelin advanced further, and Bone Shield was unlocked and improved. As Yan removed his jacket and prepared for battle, Fong Zhao also remembered the weapon mastery skill he had recently acquired. Yan stepped forward, carrying his massive bladed bow, and confidently declared that even if Fong Zhao summoned 20 skeletons, victory would still be impossible. Fong Zhao simply smiled and equipped his apprentice robe, knowing the battle might not go the way Yan expected. Green energy surrounded his body as the system displayed his updated abilities. Summon Skeleton had been successfully grasped, Bone Javelin had reached mastery, and Bone Shield had become proficient. He also equipped an apprentice staff, a mass-produced gray inferior-grade weapon that slightly enhanced spell effectiveness, while his matching apprentice robe provided a small reduction in incoming damage. Across the arena, Yan tightened his grip on the enormous bladed bow and praised Fong Zhao's unwavering confidence, saying that was exactly what he expected from the rival he had chosen. But the atmosphere changed instantly, as crackling green energy erupted around Yan's body. In the blink of an eye, he closed the distance and appeared directly in front of Fong Zhao, launching a vicious attack. High above the arena, 3 researchers watched the battle through a thick glass observation window. When one asked who they believed would win, another immediately chose Yin. After observing him closely throughout the past week, the researcher believed Yin possessed some of the most terrifying combat instincts he had ever seen. Nearby, Lu Hu and Old Shen quietly discussed the match. Lu Hu felt the researchers were reaching conclusions far too quickly. When Old Shen asked why he had even come, Lu Hu simply replied that, as their teacher, it was only natural for him to watch 2 of his most outstanding students fight. Old Shen then asked whether he genuinely believed Fong Zhao could win. Lu Hu answered without hesitation. Although Fong Zhao could summon an impressive number of skeletons, he was still fundamentally a physically fragile mage. However, Yin had also comprehended an extremely powerful displacement skill just 1 day earlier, meaning this battle could still produce plenty of surprises. Back in the arena, Yin suddenly lunged forward and swung his massive bladed bow in a brutal arc. Fong Zhao quickly jumped backward, narrowly avoiding the heavy blade and immediately realizing just how dangerous Yin was in close combat. Keeping his distance would be essential. Unfortunately, Yin had no intention of allowing that strategy to work. He shifted his weapon into a traditional bow stance as radiant blue energy gathered along its frame, warning Fong Zhao that distance wouldn't protect him either. In the next instant, he unleashed Demon Hunting Arrow. A barrage of glowing blue projectiles ripped through the air directly toward Fong Zhao. Reacting immediately, Fong Zhao cast Summon Skeleton, bringing an undead warrior forward to shield him. The skeleton raised its bony arms and absorbed the incoming attack, successfully blocking the arrows. Seeing this, Yin immediately drew his bow again and realized that his priority had to be disrupting Fong Zhao's summoning rhythm. Suddenly, a jagged bolt of energy slammed directly into Fong Zhao's active summoning circle and shattered it before the spell could finish. With his summon interrupted, Fong Zhao was forced to dodge the relentless rain of blue arrows, barely escaping the attack. But instead of panicking, he quickly slammed his palm against the arena floor and created another glowing green summoning circle. Activating the spell again, multiple heavily armored skeletons emerged from the ethereal light and entered the battlefield. Watching from above, Lu Hu couldn't help commenting on how formidable the younger generation had become. He told Old Shen that regardless of whether Fong Zhao ultimately defeated Yin, what he had already demonstrated today was enough to earn Lu Hu's full support for placing him on the seed list. Still, he warned Old Shen not to celebrate too early. Old Shen remained focused on the battle below, quietly recognizing something especially impressive about Fong Zhao. Despite facing such relentless pressure, the young Necromancer remained remarkably calm and composed, displaying the kind of battle temperament that seemed far beyond his actual experience. Old Shen firmly believed the young necromancer was still hiding a trump card. Down in the arena, Fong Zhao calmly watched Yan battle through the advancing skeletons and realized there was no reason to keep holding back. Raising his skull staff overhead, he released a surge of deathly green energy and pushed Summon Skeleton to its full power. The researchers in the observation room immediately stared in disbelief as 30 skeletons appeared across the battlefield. They couldn't understand how someone who had awakened only a few days earlier could already develop his summoning ability to such an absurd level. Completely surrounded by the undead army, Yan showed no fear. Instead, he smiled and declared that only someone with this level of power deserved to be called his rival. Meanwhile, Fong Zhao quietly pulled the hood of his camouflage cloak over his head. Yan was far too calm for someone surrounded by 30 skeletons, which meant he was definitely hiding something. Suddenly, Yan's weapon erupted with brilliant green energy as he unleashed Fierce Strike, instantly smashing one skeleton into fragments. As the remaining undead closed in, a toxic green glow appeared in his eyes. Once he had created enough distance, Yan activated Shadow Charge. In an instant, he disappeared in a streak of green light and rushed directly toward the cloaked figure holding the skull staff. Watching from above, Lu Hu immediately believed the fight was over. A physically fragile mage caught at close range had almost no chance of surviving Yan's explosive assault. Old Shen, however, remained completely silent. Yan closed the distance in an instant and brought his glowing weapon down with a devastating Vengeance Fierce Strike. But beneath the hood, Fong Zhao quietly realized that Yan had taken the bait. At the last possible moment, Bone Shield activated, forming a massive glowing green skull barrier in front of him. Yan's weapon slammed into it with a deafening crash, but the barrier completely absorbed the attack and sent him flying backward. Inside the observation room, Lu Hu grabbed the console in disbelief. He couldn't understand how Fong Zhao had somehow comprehended another completely new skill on his own. Back in the arena, the two fighters stood separated across the damaged battlefield. Fong Zhao politely apologized, explaining that Yan was much stronger than expected, so he had been forced to use some unconventional tactics. Then his skull staff suddenly fell from his hand and clattered against the ground. Lu Hu stared in confusion, while Old Shen finally smiled after realizing what Fong Zhao had done. The young necromancer had used an optical camouflage cloak to hide himself among his own skeletons. With dozens of nearly identical undead surrounding the battlefield, Yan had no way of knowing which figure was actually Fong Zhao. Frustrated, Yan demanded that he stop hiding and come out while continuing to destroy skeleton after skeleton. But as the battle dragged on, he quickly realized that this strategy was slowly exhausting him. If things continued this way, the endless undead would eventually wear him down. Left with no other choice, Yan activated another powerful ability. A terrifying burst of energy exploded from his body, instantly causing every nearby skeleton to collapse without him even touching them. Lu Hu's eyes widened in disbelief, unable to understand how Yan had already mastered such a skill at his current level. Professor Chen explained that although the ability had an extremely long cooldown, it provided devastating burst damage and was perfect for escaping dangerous situations. Amid the collapsing skeletons, however, one cloaked figure quietly began moving away. The moment Yan noticed it, his eyes lit up. Believing he had finally found Fong Zhao, he immediately charged forward at full speed and launched another attack. A blazing green mass of energy descended from above as Yan unleashed Skyfall Strike directly onto the camouflage-cloaked figure. A massive explosion erupted across the arena, shaking the battlefield with tremendous force. When the smoke cleared, the cloaked body lay motionless on the ground. Standing nearby with his bow in hand, Yan confidently declared that although Fong Zhao was incredibly strong, he had his own pride and refused to lose. He then looked toward the observation deck and urgently told them to call the medical staff, making it clear that he had no intention of causing a casualty. But something immediately felt wrong. Old Shen, Lu Hu, and Zhao Chan weren't looking at him like someone who had just won. Confused by their expressions, Yan slowly turned toward the fallen figure. As the camouflage cloak shifted and revealed a bare skeletal skull underneath, his expression instantly changed. The person he had attacked wasn't Fong Zhao at all. At that moment, Yan finally understood the trap. Fong Zhao hadn't simply disguised himself among the skeletons. He had used a reverse disguise combined with a second layer of deception, tricking Yan into attacking an ordinary skeleton disguised as him. Yan finally realized just how deeply he had fallen into Fong Zhao's trap. Fong Zhao hadn't disguised himself as a skeleton. Instead, he had made one of his skeletons disguise itself as Fong Zhao pretending to be a skeleton. Before Yan could fully process the deception, another skeleton suddenly grabbed him from behind. Startled, he cried out as the real Fong Zhao calmly appeared behind him and thanked him for letting him win. With no strength left to continue, Yan released his weapon and admitted defeat. The massive energy consumption from his final skill had completely drained him, and his body immediately began collapsing forward. Fortunately, one of Fong Zhao's skeletons caught him before he hit the ground. Looking toward his rival, Yan reluctantly thanked him, but Fong Zhao simply gave him a thumbs up and told him not to worry about it. He could just consider it sympathy for the loser. Moments later, Several skeletons carried Yin away on a stretcher, while he loudly declared that failure was nothing more than fuel that would make him stronger. After the battle, Fong Zhao approached Lu Hu and Old Shen. Although reluctant to admit it, Old Shen acknowledged that Fong Zhao's combat ability had far exceeded his expectations. Fong Zhao respectfully accepted the compliment, but Old Shen continued by saying that with such skillful and deceptive tactics, he would undoubtedly become a tactical master someday. Hearing that, Fong Zhao quietly wondered why the compliment somehow didn't feel like praise. Lu Hu then asked about the defensive spell Fong Zhao had used during the fight and whether it was a new skill he had comprehended himself. Fong Zhao confirmed it and demonstrated both a glowing bone shield and several bone javelins. He explained that while practicing Summon Skeleton, he had gained some inspiration and comprehended two new abilities, which he named Bone Javelin and Bone Shield. Lu Hu and Old Shen stared silently for a moment before Lu Hu suddenly slapped Fong Zhao on the shoulder, praising him for always finding new ways to surprise them. Fong Zhao immediately asked him to be a little gentler. Since Old Shen happened to have professional testing equipment available, Lu Hu suggested they measure the power of Fong Zhao's newly created skills. Old Shen agreed and immediately went to make the arrangements. Unfortunately, Fong Zhao suddenly leaned forward from exhaustion, forcing Lu Hu to support him. He explained that his spirit power was completely depleted after the battle, so he probably couldn't perform another test. Lu Hu dismissed the problem as something trivial. Soon, Fong Zhao found himself staring at an entire box filled with spirit power recovery potions, wondering if they were handing out draft beer. Without hesitation, he grabbed a bottle of blue recovery potion and drank it straight down. Seeing someone consume expensive recovery potions like ordinary water was certainly refreshing. Once his spirit power recovered, Fong Zhao joined Lu Hu and Old Shen beside another test golem. After confirming everything was ready, Lu Hu instructed him to attack the machine exactly as he had during combat class. Holding his glowing skull staff, Fong Zhao activated Bone Javelin and launched a massive bone spear directly into the golem. The result immediately appeared. His attack capability reached 85. A female researcher couldn't help exclaiming at the impressive number, while Old Shen noted that such offensive power was exceptional for someone who had only recently awakened. More importantly, this wasn't a skill Fong Zhao had learned from someone else. He had supposedly created it himself. Next came the defensive test. The golem charged forward and threw a powerful punch, but Fong Zhao immediately activated Bone Shield. A glowing skeletal barrier appeared and successfully blocked the attack, producing a defense score of 80. Comparing the results, Lu Hu noted that Fong Zhao's offensive ability was comparable to a Storm Mage, while his defense rivaled that of an Earth Knight. He enthusiastically slapped Fong Zhao on the shoulder again and declared that the boy had practically been born to become a Necromancer. Fong Zhao immediately asked him to stop hitting his shoulder, quietly thinking that anyone watching might assume his teacher was somehow increasing his stats by repeatedly patting him. As they walked away, Old Shen praised Bone Javelin and Bone Shield and suggested submitting both abilities to the Federation skill repository. He explained that the repository was a massive skill collection system established by the Federation, allowing people to exchange contribution points for various abilities stored within it. Their research institute happened to contain a branch of the repository, meaning Fong Zhao could access it whenever he wanted. Fong Zhao gladly accepted the offer. Soon, he and Lu Hu arrived before a pair of enormous doors. Lu Hu explained that after uploading his newly created skills, Fong Zhao could use the contribution points he had accumulated to exchange for abilities he actually needed. Fong Zhao thanked him and entered the room. At first, everything inside was completely dark, leaving him confused about why something called a skill library had no visible books at all. But moments later, the darkness suddenly illuminated, revealing an enormous glowing library stretching before him. Looking across the countless towering shelves, Fong Zhao immediately understood why this place was called the Federation Skill Repository. Practically every skill he knew of could be found somewhere inside. He approached a glowing pedestal as several system interfaces appeared before him. Moments later, a notification confirmed that Bone Javelin and Bone Shield had been successfully entered into the repository. In return, Fong Zhao received an incredible reward of 200 contribution points. Another system notification immediately appeared, informing Fong Zhao that, as the creator of these new skills, he would permanently receive 50% of all future exchange fees whenever someone obtained them from the repository. Realizing this could become a continuous source of contribution points, Fong Zhao was pleasantly surprised. Since entering the Federation Skill Repository was such a rare opportunity, he had no intention of grabbing only a few abilities and leaving. Walking through the enormous library, he pulled out a glowing book titled Skeleton Modification Technique and immediately realized it could serve as valuable reference material for future skill deductions. With 100 soul power available, Fong Zhao decided to improve one of his most important abilities first. The system detected the skeleton meditation method and asked whether he wanted to consume soul power to upgrade it. He immediately confirmed. A powerful green death aura surrounded his body, and suddenly, Fong Zhao found himself standing before an enormous crowned skeleton king. The system announced that the enhancement had succeeded as the towering undead ruler extended a glowing book toward him. When Fong Zhao accepted it, countless runes emerged from the pages, revealing a brand new technique called the Skeleton King Meditation Method. According to the system, this enhanced version increased meditation speed by 100% compared to the original, while also strengthening all Necromancer class skills. Feng Zhao immediately understood how valuable the upgrade was. Not only could he level faster, but every Necromancer ability he possessed would become stronger as well. The soul power had definitely been well spent. Still, even the strongest skills were useless without enough spirit power to activate them. His battle against Yan had nearly drained him completely, so improving his energy reserves and recovery became the next priority. Fortunately, he still had plenty of contribution points. After searching the repository, Feng Zhao selected a skill called Presence of Mind and spent 20 contribution points to exchange for it. The ability passively increased spirit power recovery for magic users and could also restore additional spirit power when actively triggered. Its only major weakness was the difficulty of learning it, but that meant almost nothing to someone with Feng Zhao's system. A notification immediately asked whether he wanted to spend 10 soul power to master the skill quickly. He accepted without hesitation. Moments later, Presence of Mind was successfully mastered, and a glowing blue aura surrounded his body as he immediately noticed a significant improvement in his spirit recovery speed. With this ability, Feng Zhao confidently believed that if he fought Yan again, he could simply overwhelm him with an endless wave of skeletons. But he wasn't finished yet. Gathering several more books, he selected Vine Entanglement, Swamp Spell, Earthwall Spell, Spiderweb Spell, and Ray of Weakness, planning to use them as reference material for future skill deductions and upgrades. The exchange cost another 60 contribution points. Feng Zhao then turned his attention toward equipment. Powerful skills alone weren't enough. He also needed gear capable of supporting his growing abilities. Since his current apprentice rank limited him to lower-grade equipment, he spent another 40 contribution points upgrading his setup. He equipped a new hat and an apprentice necklace that slightly increased spirit recovery speed, followed by an apprentice ring that slightly reduced skill cooldowns. More importantly, completing the 4-piece apprentice mage set granted an additional bonus, increasing both training speed and skill proficiency growth by 10%. Surrounded by a faint green aura, Feng Zhao immediately realized that his future leveling speed would become even faster. Walking through the grand halls of the repository, he couldn't help feeling satisfied with everything he had gained. The Federation Skill Repository truly deserved its reputation. But just as he thought he was finished, his massive skeleton clone appeared behind him, reminding Feng Zhao of something important. He wasn't the only one who needed new abilities. His clone needed a proper skill set as well. After searching through the available options, Feng Zhao selected 3 essential combat skills: Weapon Mastery, Parry, and Warcry. These abilities were perfectly suited to strengthen the skeleton clone's close combat capabilities. With another 30 contribution points spent, the exchange was successfully completed. Feng Zhao closed the glowing Weapon Mastery skill book and quietly admitted that while the Federation Skill Repository was incredible, it burned through contribution points frighteningly fast. He couldn't help wondering whether he would ever find another job as profitable as being Yan's training partner. Back at the arena, Old Shen and Lu Hu asked how his trip to the repository had gone and whether he had learned anything useful. Feng Zhao happily confirmed that his gains had been enormous. Just then, Yan suddenly called out from the side, declaring that he refused to accept his previous defeat. Holding a blue recovery potion, he challenged Feng Zhao to another match, claiming that he had only lost before because he hadn't understood Feng Zhao's tactics. This time, he was certain he could defeat him quickly. Feng Zhao calmly asked if he was really sure about fighting again, especially since he had just upgraded several of his skills. But Yan stubbornly declared that he refused to remain second best forever and would use everything he had to win this time. Lu Hu immediately pointed out that another match counted as extra training, meaning Yan would have to pay additional contribution points. Feng Zhao had absolutely no problem with that. After all, Yan was the one who would eventually have to repay the debt. Tossing the recovery potion back to him, Feng Zhao agreed to begin and casually suggested that Yan keep the potion because he might need it very soon. Furious at the provocation, Yan erupted with green energy and immediately launched his strongest attack, Heavenfall Strike. Watching from nearby, Zhao Qian realized that Yan had gone all out from the very beginning. In her opinion, it was actually the correct strategy. Against a necromancer like Feng Zhao, overwhelming him before he could establish his undead army was probably Yan's only realistic path to victory. Old Shen was also curious to see how Feng Zhao would respond after obtaining his new abilities. But instead of revealing some complicated new tactic, Feng Zhao simply activated Summon Skeleton again. Xiao Qian stared in confusion, wondering why he was repeating the exact same strategy as before. Then the battlefield completely changed. An enormous green summoning circle spread beneath Feng Zhao as a massive wave of skeletons erupted onto the arena, flooding the battlefield from every direction. A deafening explosion shook the ground as Yan's attack collided with the undead force. When the smoke began to clear, Lu Hu immediately noticed that the power of Yan's attack had increased dramatically. Old Shen was equally surprised, realizing that Yan had actually evolved and strengthened his skill after their previous battle. Feng Zhao, however, remained completely calm. He acknowledged that Yian had become stronger, but casually revealed that his own skills had also leveled up. Only then did Yian realize the horrifying situation around him. He was completely trapped inside a massive undead army. Staring at the endless skeletons closing in from every direction, he screamed in frustration that he had been so close to succeeding. His confidence instantly disappeared as he realized there was nowhere left to escape. In desperation, he even begged the skeletons not to hit his face. Unfortunately, the undead showed no mercy. They swarmed him from every direction, completely overwhelming him within seconds and leaving him bruised and battered beneath the skeletal horde. As the dust settled, Fang Zhao calmly informed Old Shen that the day's sparring session was officially over. Old Shen could only sigh, estimating that Yian would probably need at least a week to recover. He then asked Fang Zhao one more time whether he truly had no interest in establishing a dedicated Necromancer research association. Fang Zhao refused without hesitation. Internally, he knew allowing researchers to study his abilities too closely could expose the existence of his system, and that would bring him endless trouble. Meanwhile, inside the quiet halls of the Federation Skill Repository, a mysterious woman approached a glowing magical crystal and began examining its latest records. The moment she finished reading the data, her eyes widened in disbelief. Someone had actually registered 2 brand new Necromancer skills. Curious, she immediately spent 20 contribution points to exchange for them. Looking through the glowing skill book, she discovered Bone Javelin and Bone Shield. After studying their structure, she was stunned by the creativity behind them. She had never imagined skeleton-based magic could be used this way, and immediately concluded that whoever developed these abilities had to be a genius. Holding the book tightly, Suyan hurried away, determined to tell her father about the discovery. At the same time, Lu Hu was once again sitting across from Principal Su Tianhua inside his office. The principal looked exhausted the moment he saw him and asked why he had come back again. Lu Hu immediately repeated his request to add Fang Zhao to the school's seed list, while Old Shen stood beside him and declared that he was also willing to personally vouch for the student. Principal Su Tianhua calmly drank his tea and questioned why Old Shen had joined this nonsense. In his opinion, even if a necromancer performed exceptionally well at the beginning, the profession would eventually suffer from a severe lack of suitable high-level skills. But his expression changed instantly when Lu Hu revealed that Fang Zhao had already comprehended 2 new necromancer abilities entirely on his own. The principal was so shocked that he immediately spat out his tea. Old Shen quickly added that simply creating new skills wasn't the most impressive part. What truly mattered was how powerful and practical those abilities actually were. Before he could finish explaining their performance, the office door suddenly opened and Suyan walked in holding the glowing skill book. She excitedly told her father that 2 completely new necromancer skills had just appeared in the Federation Skill Repository. Principal Su Tianhua froze and asked if she was really talking about necromancer abilities. In response, Suyan summoned several glowing green bone javelins along with a bone shield. She explained that she had only studied the techniques briefly and hadn't fully mastered them yet, but even from what she had seen so far, their effects were undeniably impressive. Principal Su Tianhua and Suyan stared at the newly registered skills as Suyan eagerly asked her father if he knew who had created them. The principal hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. But Suyan's eyes immediately lit up with excitement as she declared that she wanted to take the mysterious developer as her master. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, Fang Zhao sat quietly at his desk with his eyes closed, meditating peacefully until Yian once again called out to his so-called rival and demanded another fight. Fang Zhao opened his eyes with a bored expression and asked if Yian seriously wanted to challenge him again. At this point, he had already lost count of how many times Yian had come looking for a rematch. He even wondered whether the guy ever spent any time actually cultivating instead of constantly challenging him. But Yian confidently declared that this time was different. Pointing proudly toward an embarrassed Zhao Chan, he explained that with her help over the past few days, his strength had improved dramatically, and this time he was absolutely certain he could win. Xiao Chan immediately clarified that Yan had publicly begged her on his knees, and she had only agreed to help because she wanted to avoid any further misunderstandings. Hearing that she could accelerate someone's growth, Fang Zhao suddenly became interested and asked what exactly she had done. Xiao Chan happily explained that a few days earlier, while sleeping, she had somehow comprehended an extremely useful support skill called Lullaby. The ability could accelerate spirit power recovery while also enhancing the effects of meditation and training. Yan quickly added that the skill had one major limitation. It could only be used 3 times per day, and he had been spending 2 contribution points every week just to secure access to it. Hearing this, Fang Zhao silently wondered whether Yian was genuinely planning to spend the rest of his life paying off debt. Completely unaware of his thoughts, Yian leaned aggressively over the desk and declared that with his recent improvements, he was finally confident he could defeat him. But Fang Zhao was no longer paying attention. If Lullaby could enhance meditation and training, then perhaps its effects could also reach his skeleton clone inside the undead realm. Without warning, Fang Zhao grabbed Zhao Chan by the shoulder and asked whether she could sell him one of her remaining Lullaby uses for the day. Zhao Chan hesitated before admitting that it wasn't impossible. Meanwhile, Yian furiously shouted at Fang Zhao for completely ignoring him. Fong Zhao casually raised one hand and activated Summon Skeleton. A group of undead warriors immediately appeared around Yan, as Fong Zhao told him to entertain himself with the skeletons first. He also reminded him not to forget to transfer the contribution points afterward. Furious at being treated so casually, Yan yelled that Fong Zhao was looking down on him. But Fong Zhao had already turned back toward Zhao Chan and politely asked her to cast Lullaby. She agreed, and as Fong Zhao sat down to meditate, glowing green musical notes began swirling around his body. At the same time, beneath the blood-red sky of the undead realm, his skeleton clone entered meditation and immediately received the same enhancement. Fong Zhao was delighted to discover that Lullaby could affect his clone as well. The system displayed the clone's current status at upper apprentice rank, along with its improved attributes and 50 soul power. Spotting an approaching enemy skeleton armed with a spiked club, the clone decided this was the perfect opportunity to test its newly acquired combat skills. As the enemy charged, the clone tightened its grip on the bone spear and activated parry, entering a defensive stance that reduced the damage of the incoming attack. The moment the weapons collided, it transitioned into weapon mastery, adjusting its grip and movements with far greater precision. With one violent strike, the clone smashed the enemy backward, spun the spear around, and finished the fight with a reverse thrust directly through its skull. After absorbing the rewards, Fong Zhao immediately noticed something incredible. Even the system rewards had increased by 10%. He couldn't help thinking that Lullaby was practically a divine support skill. A notification confirmed an increase of 0.11 strength and 0.55 soul power. Soon, two larger skeletons appeared in the distance. The clone slammed its weapon into the ground, released a streak of blue energy, and charged forward. One enemy after another fell as repeated notifications confirmed additional gains in strength and soul power. But when the clone looked farther into the wasteland, it discovered something much bigger. An entire undead legion stood in the distance. Instead of retreating, the skeleton clone decided to test its limits. Raising its weapon, it roared and challenged the entire army to attack at once. Countless undead immediately turned toward him and raised their weapons. At that moment, the clone activated Battle Cry. According to the system, the skill temporarily increased 3 major attributes: strength, constitution, and agility. The exact boost and duration depended on the user's attributes and skill proficiency. Empowered by the buff, the skeleton clone charged directly into the approaching horde. Blue energy flashed across the battlefield as its weapon tore through one enemy after another, triggering continuous increases in strength and soul power. Surrounded by blue soul flames and feeling its power rise with every kill, the clone realized it could still become much stronger. System notifications continued appearing one after another, repeatedly granting 0.11 strength and 0.55 soul power. But just as everything seemed to be going perfectly, the skeleton clone suddenly sensed something above. Looking toward the sky, it froze. A gigantic skeletal figure was slowly descending from above, carrying an enormous glowing sword. Massive wings extended from its back while a halo floated above its skull. The system identified the terrifying creature as a bone angel. Standing beneath the enormous monster in the burning wasteland, the skeleton clone could only stare upward in disbelief. Had a boss seriously just spawned directly inside the beginner area? The massive bone angel comes crashing down from the sky, swinging its enormous sword straight at the skeleton clone. The clone jumps backward at the last second, and the blade slams into the ground with devastating force. Hiding behind a rock as dark energy gathers around its body, the skeleton clone quickly realizes that taking even one clean hit would mean certain death. If defense can't save it, then there is only one choice: attack first. It springs into the air toward the giant sword, activates Battle Cry, and its eyes blaze bright blue as power surges into the bone spear. With a furious roar, the clone uses a shield-breaking stance and drives the spear into the bone angel's shoulder. A green energy icon flashes as Brutal Strike activates, and the skeleton clone immediately continues the assault, swinging its arm rapidly and hammering the giant with repeated blows. The bone angel is forced backward, leaving the clone wondering how it will respond. Without hesitation, the creature slams its massive skeletal hand down, surprising the clone with how decisive it is, then follows with another brutal sword swing. This time, the skeleton clone activates parry and catches the giant blade, but the overwhelming impact still sends it sliding backward across the rocky ground as blue energy erupts from the collision. While recovering, the clone realizes that breaking one of the angel's arms earlier was the right decision. If the creature still had both arms, that last strike probably would have knocked every bone in its body apart. Better yet, the damage has revealed a weakness, the blue fire burning inside the shattered skeletal arm. But before the clone can exploit it, the bone angel raises its sword with its remaining hand and suddenly starts spinning. Green energy swirls around its body, rapidly expanding into a massive tornado. The skeleton clone immediately senses trouble, and a moment later, the spinning force tears straight through a mountain and shatters it. Seeing that destruction, the clone understands what the angel is doing. Since one arm is gone, it is using the centrifugal force from its rotation to compensate for the lost strength. The technique is powerful enough to destroy an entire mountain, and while the creature is spinning, there is no way to accurately target its weakness. Crosshairs lock onto the skeleton clone as the green tornado rushes toward it. With a steep cliff behind its back and no path left to escape, the clone can't help wondering where this bag of bones gets such an absurd desire to fight. But this really is a dead end. Facing the incoming sword wind, the skeleton clone grips its bone staff tightly and decides to gamble everything on one move. The green sword wind tears across the rocky ground, and even without taking the blade directly, the clone can tell that the wind alone is powerful enough to scrape bones and shear flesh. Then it notices an opening. The skeleton clone instantly activates charge and bursts forward, wrapped in blue energy, smashing directly into the bone angel's leg. The limb shatters under the impact, and the clone roars in triumph before mocking the enormous creature for having osteoporosis, thinking it should go back and get some calcium. More importantly, destroying the leg exposes the bone angel's chest, revealing the blue fire core hidden inside. The moment the skeleton clone sees the soul fire core, it knows this is its chance. Several bone javelins are immediately thrown toward the exposed target, but the bone angel reacts in alarm and folds one of its huge wings across its chest, blocking the incoming attack. It then spreads its wings and launches into the sky. Watching it fly, the skeleton clone remarks that it knew those wings couldn't possibly be there just for decoration. High above the ground, the bone angel raises its sword and begins forming an enormous glowing sphere of energy. The skeleton clone prepares itself, but right then, a system prompt appears. The clone calmly notes that, unfortunately for its opponent, its system isn't just for show either. The system begins the fusion deduction of web spell and skeletal armament, and moments later, another prompt confirms that the deduction has succeeded. A new skill has been created, Bone Shackle. It is an apprentice level, proficient skill capable of condensing undead mana into sturdy bone shackles that bind an enemy, while the binding strength, duration, and casting distance depend on the spirit attribute and skill proficiency. A glowing blue bone shackles icon appears, and the skeleton clone smiles with satisfaction. Everything happened exactly as it deduced. Skill deduction really can combine the characteristics of other professional skills and turn them into even stronger undead skills. Meanwhile, the bone angel is already preparing to strike from the sky. The skeleton clone points 2 fingers toward it and taunts the creature for enjoying flying so much. In the next instant, massive blue chains burst from the ground and wrap tightly around the bone angel. The clone grabs the glowing chains, activates bone shackles, and yells for it to get down. The angel is violently dragged from the air and crashes hard into the ground under the weight of the chains. Pulling the restraints even tighter, the skeleton clone tells the helpless creature not to struggle, then adds that the more it struggles, the more excited it gets. Standing tall with its staff in hand and a blazing blue aura surrounding its body, the skeleton clone finally executes the bone angel as a massive beam of energy pierces downward. Once the battle is over, the clone stands atop a rock holding the bone angel's blue soul fire and declares that it will gladly accept it. The soul fire flows into the glowing gem on its armor, and the system immediately reports a massive gain of 100 soul power. The skeleton clone is surprised that one enemy provided so much soul power, but something doesn't make sense. Its body hasn't grown at all. Another system prompt soon gives the answer. Its base attributes have already reached the race limit, meaning it can no longer continue to gain attribute. The clone finally understands why its attribute has stopped increasing. With that mystery solved, it slowly looks toward the vast, desolate red sky above, wondering what else might exist beyond the heavens. And now, more than anything, it wants to see it for itself. The skeleton clone reaches toward a race evolution prompt showing its current race as an apprentice-level skeleton, with the option to evolve into a black iron-level skeleton warrior at an estimated cost of 100 soul power point. Without hesitation, it selects yes. Dark energy immediately swirls around its body as the evolution begins, and the clone declares that its path of evolution officially starts now. Intense blue and black flames completely engulf its face as the path of slaughter drives the transformation forward. With a powerful roar, the skeleton clone completes the process and successfully evolves into a bone warrior. The evolution instantly raises all 4 base attributes, strength, constitution, agility, and spirit, by 30 points each. Even better, the clone unlocks a new race talent called Bone Monarch, a special blessing that increases the damage it deals to skeletons while reducing the damage it receives from them. Realizing this talent is practically made for fast grinding in the undead realm, the clone soon notices a low-level skeleton quietly sneaking toward it. Instead of reacting, it simply stands there and lets the creature approach. The small skeleton swings directly at its head, but the attack barely does anything. After confirming just how powerful the damage reduction is, the clone realizes there is no longer any reason to defend against weak skeletons. Right then, another system prompt appears, offering to upgrade its skeletal armament. Following its evolution, the clone selects yes, and blue energy surges through the air as the equipment upgrade begins. The system soon confirms that the process is complete, unlocking the white common-grade bone armor. As the new armor fuses directly with its body, the clone immediately feels a major improvement in both strength and overall defense. Now fully upgraded, it turns its glowing blue eyes toward the unfortunate skeleton nearby. With a completely insincere apology, the clone steps forward and decides to use the terrified little creature for target practice. One powerful strike sends a shockwave tearing ahead, leaving the weak skeleton mob clutching its head in panic and confusion. A moment later, the blast detonates and wipes out the surrounding skeleton mobs in a massive explosion. Walking through the destruction, the clone realizes that combining fist attacks with bone armor dramatically increases its damage against skeletons. It receives small increases to strength and soul power afterward, but the gains are hardly meaningful anymore. These low-level mobs have become useless for growth, so the clone looks across the desolate landscape and decides it is time to venture deeper into the undead realm. With blue light gleaming from its eye in the darkness, it heads toward the higher-level regions. Back in the real world, Fanjo realizes that his clone's boss fight took far too much time while he was meditating. He opens his eyes, breathing heavily, and Bao-chan quickly supports him when he stumbles, asking whether he was injured during meditation. Fanho immediately understands what happened. The damage his clone suffered during the boss fight was transferred back to his own body. Realizing he needs to be more careful from now on, he raises a hand and reassures Xiaoan that he is fine. At that moment, Efon calls out to Fanha, announcing that the summoned bones can no longer restrain him. Green energy erupts around Efon as he breaks free. Then he leaps forward and demands a fair fight from Fang Zhao. Fanhao answers by casting bone shackles. Chains instantly appear and wrap tightly around his opponent, leaving Ian trapped by the spectral restraints and groaning painfully in defeat. Efon immediately complains that the duel was unfair because Fanha used an unknown skill, but Fanha simply tells him to come back after saving enough contribution points. The spectators begin wondering whether Fanha actually created the bone shackle skill himself. Meanwhile, as a trapped fan desperately begs the crowd for help, Fanha walks down the steps alone. Evening soon approaches, and Fanho realizes that it is already Friday. He has spent so much time focused on becoming stronger that he decides it is finally time to visit home. Before leaving, he heads toward the Resource Exchange Department building. There, Fanho exchanges 10 contribution points for 100,000 Lia currency. The receptionist warns him that contribution points are extremely difficult to earn, but Fanha insists that he needs the money right away. She eventually hands him a briefcase filled with cash and tells him he can contact her whenever he wants to make another exchange. Carrying the money with him, Fanha thinks about the children back home and hopes this will allow them to live a little better. Fanho eventually arrives at the Yundu orphanage, where children are happily playing throughout the courtyard. Watching the energetic kids, Sister Ruru quietly wonders how many of them will successfully awaken until Fang Zhao suddenly calls out to her. Fanha approaches with a smile, carrying bags packed with food. The moment the children see him, they excitedly swarm around Fanhao and start asking for treats. He reassures them that he brought enough food for everyone. Sister Rura then asks Fanho how his school's awakening test went. Fanho tells her that he awakened as a necromancer, but Sister Rura doesn't react negatively at all. Instead, she gently reassures him that successfully awakening is what truly matters. The nearby children overhear their conversation, with one saying necromancy sounds scary, while another thinks skeletons sound incredibly cool. Wanting to entertain them, Fanha summons 2 small, weakened skeletons. The children immediately surround the summons and begin playing with them, even tossing one skeleton's skull around like a ball. Fanha then gives Sister Ruru a briefcase meant for the director. But before the peaceful reunion can continue, both Fang Zhao and Sister Rura suddenly sense an unexpected presence. A shady-looking man wearing a gold chain approaches them with a smug expression, then asks whether his arrival is disturbing them. A dangerous-looking crowd has gathered outside Yudu Orphanage, and Sister Ruru immediately steps forward to confront them. She demands to know why they showed up so early when they had agreed to wait another couple of days, but the thug answers by violently shoving her to the ground. He roars that nobody gets to delay money owed to the Tiger Claw gang, then stands over her and declares that today is their absolute final deadline. Unless the debt is paid immediately, the entire piece of land the orphanage put up as collateral will become gang property. While the man laughs, a little girl quietly slips over to Sister Ruru's side, then suddenly throws herself straight at the thug. Calling herself the world's #1 troublemaker, she boldly tries to protect her sister. Furious, the thug swings his foot toward the child, and Sister Ruru screams for Xing in horror. Before the kick can connect, however, Fanha's skeleton clone suddenly swoops in and blocks it. The sight of an actual summoned skeleton stopping his attack sends the thug stumbling backward in panic. Fanho walks over, gently rests a reassuring hand on the little girl's head, and orders the man to apologize immediately unless he wants to deal with the consequences. One of the henchmen leans toward his leader and whispers, "Brother who?" pointing out that Joe is nothing more than a necromancer. Ghost-faced martial artist Liu immediately erupts with aura and destroys the skeleton clone with a single strike, dismissing Zhao as a trash class trying to act tough. Manhwa doesn't even flinch. Instead, he casually wonders whether this guy is supposed to be a professional. As he walks beside Sister Ruru, Sho asks who these people are, and she explains that they came from the Tiger Claw Training Equipment Company, supposedly to sell training gear for the children. A flashback shows the kids practicing with that equipment while Ruru reveals that she and the director took out a loan to purchase it early because they didn't want the children falling behind. Unfortunately, the entire company was nothing but a front for an illegal loan shark scam. With compound interest piling up until the debt became impossible to repay, Ruru anxiously bites her lip and Fongo snaps at her for hiding such a huge problem from him. The lead loan shark aggressively points at Joe and warns him not to interfere in adult business, especially when a broke kid like him obviously doesn't have 1,000,000 Leah currency casually lying around. Joe doesn't even let him finish. He suddenly throws a loaded briefcase straight toward the man's face and yells for him to catch it, forcing the thug to frantically grab it out of the air. Joe steps forward, hands over the full 100 grand, and tells them to get lost. Ruru can only stare in confusion, completely unable to understand where he got that much money. One of the goons opens the briefcase, checks the cash, and confirms that everything is legitimate before calling his boss over to verify the stack. Instead of accepting it, Boss hurls the briefcase into the dirt and furiously tells his men to shut their mouths. Gritting his teeth, Hu admits that his boss is after the orphanage land itself, which makes 1,000,000 look like pocket change. He points his bat straight at Joe and scoffs at the money, while Joe calmly asks what more they could possibly want now that the debt has been paid. Hu responds by holding 5 fingers in Joe's face and claiming that the late payment has increased the total debt to an outrageous 5,000,000. Ruru immediately panics at the ridiculous amount, but Sho only gives them a calm smirk, realizing that collecting money was never their real purpose. These thugs came here looking for trouble from the beginning. Hu openly admits it, shouting back that a bunch of orphans have no business occupying such valuable real estate anyway. With that, the Tiger Claw gang draws its weapons and charges forward, working themselves up to take the orphanage land by force today. Fanho simply smirks at the approaching mob and casually summons skeletons to deal with their minions. A sinister aura rolls across the field, and the blonde thug immediately breaks into a nervous sweat. Armored skeleton warriors materialize in front of them, while Fanho remains perfectly calm with a gigantic skeleton warrior towering behind him as he tells the gang to face the consequences. One skeleton even leans directly into the blonde thug's personal space, interrupting his smoke break. Desperate to keep acting tough, the blonde thug convinces himself that necromancers are the weakest class and that anyone should be able to destroy the summons of a rookie. The mob storms onto the orphanage grounds, shouting insults and ordering the children to move aside. One terrified little girl curls up on the ground and cries for help. That is enough to make Fanho completely lose his patience. Dark aura surges outward as he commands his summons to scatter. Still delusional about their chances, the thugs laugh and rush headfirst into the skeleton squad, expecting an easy victory. One man brings a spiked club down on a skeleton warrior with all his strength, but blue flames simply ignite inside the summon's eyes, and it remains completely unfazed. The skeleton answers by sweeping its enormous blade forward and launching the thug through the air like a ragdoll. Blood sprays as the man screams in agony over his severed hand, finally realizing just how terrifyingly powerful these summons really are. At the same time, the skeleton gently covers a young boy's eyes so he won't have to witness the carnage. Watching from nearby, the mace-wielding thug cannot understand how an ordinary student could summon skeletons this absurdly strong. Still believing that a fragile necromancer should be helpless in close combat, he leaps directly at Fanho and unleashes a full-force, bone-shattering attack. Sister Rura desperately screams for Fanho to dodge, yet he doesn't move an inch. The blow crashes down with a massive explosion, only to be completely stopped by Fanho's translucent bone shield. The thug freezes in disbelief. Even his ultimate move failed to leave so much as a scratch. Fanho doesn't hesitate for even a second. Raising one hand, he casts bone shackles, and spectral green chains instantly wrap around the thug, suspending him in midair. With one sharp pull, Fanho drags the chains downward and smashes the man face first into the pavement. Blood spills from his mouth as he coughs violently, trapped against the ground and finally learning that this student is nothing like the opponent he expected. Even while tightly restrained by the glowing bone shackles, the thug keeps thrashing around and screaming that he's going to kill Fanho. He doesn't even get to finish his threat before 2 enormous skeleton clones appear behind him, bringing their giant saw blades dangerously close around his neck. Manhwa towers over the helpless man, blue light burning in his eyes as a dark aura pours from his body, then gives him one merciless choice: kneel and apologize, or die. Under that suffocating pressure, Lu, who starts sweating uncontrollably and can barely get his words out, every trace of his earlier arrogance disappears in an instant. Unable to withstand Feng Zhao's overwhelming aura any longer, the scarred enforcer finally drops to his knees, completely gives in, and admits that he was wrong. His henchmen can only stare in stunned silence as the leader they believed was fearless grovels in the dirt. With the terrifying skeleton warriors standing around them, the rest of the gang quickly follows, dropping to the stone courtyard and desperately begging for mercy. Their sudden submission doesn't soften Manhwa at all. Looking down at them with cold contempt, he orders them to take their compensation and disappear from his sight. Lu nervously glances toward the grim, grinning skull looming beside him and swallows what little pride he has left, completely paralyzed by fear. The moment he gets the chance, the humiliated enforcer scrambles back to his feet and orders everyone to leave immediately. When one of the thugs questions whether they're seriously going to walk away like this, Lu angrily asks if any of them is suicidal enough to challenge a monster like that. Still grinding his teeth from the humiliation, he quietly vows that they'll bide their time and make their move on the orphanage as soon as that monstrous kid is gone. Back in the sunny courtyard, the oppressive atmosphere disappears almost immediately. Sister Ruer stares at Feng Zhao in amazement and asks how he could possibly have become this overwhelmingly powerful. Fongo simply scratches his head with a modest smile and laughs it off, saying that his awakened profession is probably just a little stronger than most. Seconds later, the young orphans surround him in excitement, cheering with huge smiles and showering their savior with praise. Fanho gently pats a little girl on the head and encourages all of them to keep training hard, promising that someday, every one of them can become just as strong. He then turns to Sister Ruru and softly asks her to take him to Grandma Yun, and she agrees with a warm nod. As they walk along the stone pathway through the courtyard, Feng Hao asks whether something is wrong with Grandma Yan's health. Sister Ruris quietly explains that old age has left her with several lingering ailments. When Grandma Yan was younger, she worked herself to exhaustion, raising all of them, and those years of overwork left behind deep-rooted illnesses that are difficult to cure. Beneath the peaceful, bright sky, she reassures him that Grandma Yun will surely be incredibly happy once she sees how successful he has become. When they enter the quiet room, Grandma Yun looks up from her book, pleasantly surprised to see him. Fanha warmly tells her that everything has been going smoothly for him at Haising High School, then sets down a bag filled with supplies and explains that he came back during his break to visit everyone. Grandma gently asks why he brought so many things, but Sister Rura proudly jumps in and tells her that Fanha has become a dependable young man. She even reveals that he already paid off the debt for the training equipment, leaving Grandma Mei-Yun completely stunned. Concern immediately replaces her surprise, and Grandma Yins anxiously asks whether he borrowed money from some dangerous lender. Fangha calmly smiles and reassures her that every single coin came from his own efforts. To ease her worries, Fanha gives her a convenient half-truth, explaining that an extremely generous classmate at the academy pays him very well to act as a sparring partner. Suddenly, Grandma's frail body is seized by a harsh coughing fit. Even through the pain, however, her heart fills with pride because the boy she raised has truly become a professional with a bright future waiting for him. Fanha quickly moves to her side and supports her, asking with obvious concern whether she's all right. The old woman gently waves him away and insists that it's only an old, lingering condition, nothing that a little rest won't fix. Then, with a stern but deeply affectionate look, she tells him not to waste his energy worrying about her. What matters now is keeping all of his attention on the crucial midterm exams ahead. Surprised, Fanho asks how she even knows about his upcoming midterm. Grandma chuckles warmly and reminds him that Sister Wanra went through this exact same path only a few years ago. That brings back his memories of Wanra, who was several years ahead of him and had already graduated long ago before heading off to fight on the brutal frontline battlefields. Grandma gently tells him to get plenty of rest before the exam and says with complete confidence that his results will surpass even when Ru's words Fanha quietly takes to heart. After leaving the room, he carefully pulls the bedroom door closed behind him so the old woman can rest. Fanho approaches Sister Ruru, takes out his communicator, and transfers 20 contribution points directly to her. The sheer size of the gift immediately leaves her flustered, and she hurriedly waves her hands, insisting that she can't accept something so valuable. Fanho gently places a reassuring hand on her arm and explains that he rarely gets the chance to come back, so this is the only way he can help support everyone while he's away. Touched by his words, Sister Ruru finally gives him a soft nod and accepts. As she leads him down the hallway, she explains that Wen's old room is currently empty and offers to let him stay there so he can make himself comfortable. She also warmly asks whether there's anything special he'd like to eat, but Fanho politely turns down the offer and assures her that he's perfectly capable of taking care of himself. Once alone in the quiet room, Fanho notices a framed photograph resting on the desk. He picks it up and silently looks at the picture of Sister Wenu, thinking about how long she's been gone and wondering how she's doing on the dangerous front lines. He soon pushes those distant concerns from his mind and sits cross-legged on the bed, dark teal energy beginning to surge around his body. He is determined to ace the midterm exam and become strong enough to protect both Grandma Yoon and the orphanage. With that goal firmly in mind, Fanho gives the system a command, and his consciousness immediately descends into the undead realm. Beneath a blood-soaked sky and a sickly crimson moon, Fanha's skeleton clone makes its way deeper into the desolate wasteland, passing between the enormous, petrified rib cages of ancient beasts. The weaker mobs near the outskirts can no longer provide enough experience for him to level up, so his glowing blue eyes turn toward the unexplored depths ahead. Moving farther into the ominous darkness, he casually crushes a bone beneath his gauntlet and wonders what kind of powerful horrors might be waiting for him deeper inside. Before long, two armored undead emerge from the gloom, one wielding a sword and the other carrying a bow. Fanho quickly sizes them up. Their equipment is slightly better than what he's encountered before, but nothing about them seems particularly impressive. The undead swordsman immediately rushes him with its blade raised overhead, while the archer stays behind and lines up a shot. A sharp metallic clang rings out as Fanho effortlessly brings up his defense and stops the vicious downward slash cold. Looking at his attacker with a smug glow in his eyes, he silently mocks the enemy, realizing that the monsters deeper in the wasteland don't seem nearly as dangerous as he'd expected. Then an arrow suddenly whistles through the air, heading straight for his skull. Fanha deflects the surprise attack and immediately realizes that these wasteland fiends are much more cunning than the ones he fought before. They're already coordinating their attacks, using one fighter to pin him down while the other strikes from range. Unwilling to let the archer keep wearing him down from a distance, Fanha fixes his glowing eyes on the ranged enemy and instantly activates charge, exploding forward to close the gap in a single burst. His attack, however, cuts through nothing but empty air. Fanha is stunned as the skeletal warrior vanishes into an afterimage, making him realize that these fiends haven't simply become more intelligent, they're coordinating with each other and actively using combat skills. At that moment, the shielded skeleton surges forward and violently rams its glowing green barrier straight into him. Fanha reacts instantly, activating after image strike and slicing clean through the armored monster. The kill immediately grants him plus 0.3 constitution and plus 0.3 soul power, but before he can relax, another volley of arrows comes whistling toward him. Fanha raises his defenses and effortlessly parries the entire barrage, shattering the incoming arrows against his guard. His glowing gaze immediately locks onto the distant sniper. Pulling back, he launches a deadly bone javelin across the battlefield, and the projectile tears through the air before obliterating the skeletal archer on impact. With a brittle crunch, the defeated archer crumbles into ash, leaving behind a luminous wisp of azure soulfire drifting through the gloomy battlefield. Fanha absorbs the essence directly into his skeletal frame, and another system notification appears, increasing his agility and soul power by 0.3. After the fight finally ends, Fanha lets out a weary sigh and mutters to himself, realizing that the treacherous depths of the undead wasteland are far more lethal than he ever expected.